قاعدين بس تقصفوا فيهم. اطفال بيطلعوا تحت القصف، تحت القصف الاطفال بيطلعوا. والله تو شهرين بقول لك طلعوها تحت القصف. المدارس هذول فيهم ناس ما بيقدروا يمشوا عشان يطلعوا، حقيقة خبروهم عشان يطلعوا على طول. انتوا ولا خبر ولا اشي، بس تقصفوا ولا همكم. المدارس هذول فيهم ناس مريضين مشلولين، ولا بيقدروا يمشوا ولا بيقدروا اشي، عاجزين. حرام عليكم.
So that was a young girl outside of a UN school in Gaza saying shame on Israel for bombing women and children and civilians who they're not warning before they bomb them. Shame on them for forcibly evacuating 1.1 million Gazans, many of whom are not able to evacuate because they are disabled, because they are elderly, because they are paralyzed in fear. This was a weekend of dramatic escalation of Israel's war on Gaza, and it started on Friday night with a near total blackout in the territory. But this bombing campaign is so severe, experts are calling it one of the harshest of the 21st century. That is what we're dealing with. The death toll as of this morning has been over 8,000 people killed in Gaza, including 3,500 children. And as you heard there is a desperation as family members and people are under the rubble. There has been repeated targeting of a hospital that many Gazans are actually sheltering at. About 14,000 people are sheltering as there are bombs dropping all around. Now, about this dramatic escalation, not a lot is known because of the cuts to electricity, which means internet, phone lines, in addition to, of course, the lack of fuel, the lack of electricity generally for things like, lights and keeping hospital generators on. But Israel has not openly claimed responsibility for cutting off the electricity and the communications, cell phone towers, and internet. However, this is from Mark Regev, who is a senior Israeli government advisor, said disrupting enemy communications was a standard wartime tactic, but stopped short of confirming that it was intentional. In military operations conducted by the British Army, the American Army, often it is standard behavior to disrupt the communications of your enemy. That was his quote. What happened on the ground when those communications were cut, when Gaza was plunged into darkness? Rushdie Abu-Luf, who is a journalist with the BBC in Gaza, said since communications were cut on Friday night, ambulance drivers could not receive instructions. So they simply drove in the direction of explosions. In case you needed any confirmation of how serious this is being framed by Prime Minister Netanyahu as very much a holy war, very much an us against them. There is no sign of slowing down. He's called it, in fact, the second war of independence. So that is, those are harsh words, as many Palestinians are getting flashbacks of what their parents went through in 1948 during the Nakba, when they were forced to leave their homes and never returned. But here are some excerpts from Netanyahu's speech to give you a sense of the kind of language he is using. He said this, he said, look, everyone will have to give answers, me too, but all of this will happen only after the war. In other words, don't come to me to ask me about whether or not we're being careful with civilian lives or not, whether or not we actually bombed Hamas targets or not, whether or not we're allowing international observers into the region. Now is not the time for questions. So he says, it is now a time to come together for one purpose, to storm ahead and achieve victory with joint forces in a profound belief in our justice, a profound belief in the eternity of the Jewish people. We shall realize the prophecy of Isaiah. There will no longer be stealing at your borders, and your gates will be of glory. Together we will fight, together we will win. We will fight and we will win, and this will be the triumph of good over evil, light over darkness, life over death. Now he's in terms of that sort of triumph of Isaiah, the prophecy of Isaiah, he's referencing Isaiah 60:18 that says, violence shall be no more heard in your land, devastation or destruction within your borders. You shall call your walls salvation and your gates praise, which is very ironic considering there's a lot of violence in the land. And according to pretty much everyone who understands this issue, violence will not stop the violence in this land. This is in addition to, guys, you guys all know that there have been calls for Gazans to retreat to the south, but over the past 2 weeks, Israel's ramped up airstrikes in southern Gaza, even demanding the relocation of hundreds of thousands of residents of northern Gaza to the south. So even after, excuse me. So right, so there is no safe haven. And before we go to what's happening in the West Bank, this is what the New York Times. Again, there are very few details the Israeli military is providing them, but this is the map that they were able to sort of, based on footage, based on what they had, the reporting they'd seen, where Israel is starting. I don't know if we have this, where Israel is invading. So to the north, Israeli troops, they pieced that together through strikes posted Thursday and Saturday. Tanks and artillery are crossing into the border. Israeli troops then down to the south. This is again, thanks to like strikes and videos of tanks rolling in. Again, this is a ground incursion as well as an aerial bombardment. And it is not clear what the final goal is, but this is where we're at. And of course, the United States has not officially called for a ceasefire despite the United Nations doing so. Senator, your thoughts on just over the weekend? I mean, some of the things we were hearing and seeing or not seeing were quite chilling.
Yeah, heavy heart, Francesca. I mean, you could see what our viewers can't see when the camera's not on me. I mean, I'm just exacerbated by this whole thing, numb. And I know millions of people are numb by this. And it's people like us who are not even at the center of this pain. We're ancillary to this pain at this point. The United States of America, to our internal shame, nobody in the world is going to escape the fallout of what is happening in this war. And to see that young girl in her exacerbation over what she sees happening and how she's describing what is happening, and if she lives, right, to grow up, there will be a type of resentment here, right? There are going to be resentments on both sides of this, from Palestinians and also Israelis. And so the course of action that must be taken, despite what some of these spineless elected officials in this country are saying, is a ceasefire. Now, you do have some electeds who are standing up, led by people like Congresswoman Cori Bush and others who have asked for the ceasefire, and we've had several sign on to this. But beyond that, it's very few in the Congress who will stand up to say we need to have a ceasefire, that humanitarian efforts must prevail. They must prevail. And Francesca, I mean, it could be in any of us could be an Israeli or a Palestinian. And what would we want the governments of this world to do to try to save innocent lives? That is not happening. And it's something that Jeremy Corbyn put out in a tweet, Francesca, that I totally agree with. We know we had that anti-Semitic mob, show up looking for people from Israel on planes. No, absolutely not. Mob violence should not prevail in situations like this. But he went on to say the global rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia is terrifying. Amen to that. Hatred does nothing to generate solidarity or bring peace. Amen to that. And lastly, in his tweet, he said, we cannot lose our common humanity. In times of darkness, it's all we have left. Francesca, I question if there is any humanity going on at all. And the United States is particularly culpable in this moment because our government could do a lot to be a champion for a ceasefire, to be a champion of the reordering of things, and to try the best we can as our lives depended on it, because they do, to try to find a humanitarian way out of this. And I get the debates of, will Hamas cooperate? Will they not? Got it. All of that. We get it. However, how are we going to get to a solution that ultimately edifies and stops the senseless killings of innocents?
Yes.
Without standing up saying that we must have a ceasefire. International laws are being broken, and certainly humanitarian, any measures towards humanity is being broken. And to have Netanyahu quote the Old Testament of the Bible, you know what, Francesca, I'm not even gonna go there. I'm a Christian chick. I was raised up in the church. My mother made us go to church 8 days a week. My siblings and I come from a black theological liberation ideology. And I tell you, the New Testament says something that is different, but I'm not gonna go there. I'm gonna put that in the parking lot. This is absolutely horrendous what is happening in that region. And it could lead to the beginnings of WW3.
Yeah.
where none of us, only all that we love is on the line here. We see Iran is talking about, red lines being crossed and everything. There's nothing to be played with. And so we need more leaders around the world to stand up. And as you said, Francesca, the UN has made it clear. So have other humanitarian based groups have made it clear about what is at stake. And shout out to Jewish Voices for Peace.
Yeah, we're gonna look at them in a little bit and all the actions that have been going around. But just to pick up on a piece you said, this question of like, will Hamas cooperate? I mean, I think the real question is, will Israel cooperate?
That's it.
Hamas, whatever you think of the organization, they have hostages, and there are still people alive being held by them, and they're asking for a prisoner swap. Now, of course, when you label and you say that they're terrorists, the next question is, do you negotiate with terrorists? And if the answer is no, then you have rendered those people dead. You have signed their death certificate right there. And so there are people also inside of Israel. This weekend saw massive protests, and Israel was no exception, especially for the people who have loved ones who may very well still be alive. And can we agree that to understand that these hostages are being held in tunnels underground and yet bombing civilians above ground? I mean, what more evidence do you need that these war crimes are going on? But I did want to mention that there's been other violence in a place where Hamas is not the military, the government, and that is the West Bank. Again, the occupied territories in the West Bank. More Palestinians have been killed in Israeli occupied West Bank in the past few years than in any similar period, at least in the past 15 years, according to the Palestinian health authorities and historical data from the UN. Israeli forces and settlers have killed 95 Palestinians in the Israeli occupied West Bank since the Hamas attacks on October 7th. So again, Netanyahu's pitching this, okay, there's gonna be no more violence in the region. Well, what's happening over there? What's going on? What's going on with the settler violence? What's going on in, arguably your territory?
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.